My husband sold my $3 million ranch to his mistress for $10. He expected me to fall apart, to cry and just fade away. Instead, I think I smiled. He couldn't possibly know what I had already set in motion long before he made this clumsy move. You see, sometimes silence isn't defeat. It's the quiet hum of a woman who has already won the war. Chloe Vance cornered me in the gravel parking lot of the Agri-Supply, shaking a stack of papers in my face like she'd just hit the jackpot. "I just wanted to thank you for the ranch," she announced, her voice pitched loud enough for the other ranchers loading up their trucks to hear $10 was more than a steal. She shoved the deed transfer forward, and I could see my own name, crudely forged, scrawled across the signature line. My husband David sat in her shiny white Lexus, refusing to meet my eyes through the heavily tinted windows. I kept on loading 50-pound bags of feed into the bed of my pickup, each lift a familiar, grounding motion, while she chattered on about her grand plans for my home. The store's owner, Old Man Peterson, watched from his doorway, a look of pure confusion on his sun-weathered face. "I'm thinking of turning those rustic old stables into a hot yoga studio," Chloe continued, her shrill voice scraping across the lot. "David says you won't be any trouble getting your things out by Monday before we continue if you believe that a person's hard work and legacy deserve to be protected at all costs. Take a moment to subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it helps us share these stories with more people who need to hear them Monday." That gave me 3 days to walk away from the ranch I had built from scratch. I heaved another bag of grain, its weight a familiar comfort as my thoughts raced. The signature on her cheap-looking papers was a joke. It looked like someone had tried to trace my name with their non-dominant hand during a small earthquake. After 20 years of signing breeding certificates, vet forms, and supply invoices, you'd think David would have at least a general idea of what my actual signature looked like. Mr. Peterson ambled out from his store, approaching us with caution. He'd sold me my very first bag of feed when I was just 25, still reeling from my father's funeral, using the insurance money to buy 3,000 acres of scrubland that everyone else had written off as worthless. "Everything all right over here, Ava?" His eyes darted from Chloe's triumphant smirk to my steady, methodical work. "Just perfect, Mr. Peterson." I stacked another bag, the rough burlap, a familiar texture against my work gloves. Chloe here was just telling me how she bought my ranch. Bought? His weathered face creased into a map of disbelief. "But you just put in your winter supply order for—" $10, Chloe cut in, shoving the papers toward him as if he were a judge. "It's all legal. David handled everything." It was then I saw David's hand twitch on the car door handle, as if he thought about getting out, then decided against it. 20 years of marriage, and he couldn't even look me in the eye while trying to steal my entire world. Somehow, the cowardice stung even more than the betrayal. Chloe's phone rang. She answered with a high-pitched giggle that was far too young for a woman nearing 40. "Yes, baby, I'm telling her right now." She held the phone out in my direction. "David wants to have a word with you." I took my time, walking to the tailgate of my truck and closing it with a deliberate, solid thud. "Tell him he knows exactly where to find me." With the last bag loaded, I climbed into the cab of my truck, not giving them a second look. In my rearview mirror, I saw Mr. Peterson, staring down at the papers Chloe had pushed on him, his expression shifting from confusion to pure disgust. He'd been in this town long enough to know garbage when he saw it. The drive back to my ranch was 12 minutes long. I'd made this trip so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. Past the Hendersons' place, where their new colt was just getting its legs under it, around the sharp curve where a lightning strike had split a giant oak tree 5 summers ago. Up the rise that gave a perfect view of the valley I'd spent 2 decades turning from forgotten land into a thriving enterprise. Sophia's pickup was parked near the main barn when I pulled in. She'd been my ranch manager for a dozen years, and her instincts were sharper than any show horse. She came out of the barn holding a clipboard, but her eyes were locked on my face. Ava. Just my name, but the way she said it was a question in itself. Chloe Vance just cornered me in town, claims she bought the ranch for $10. Sophia's expression stayed a perfect mask of neutrality, but her knuckles turned bone white where she gripped the clipboard. That would explain David loading his things into a U-Haul this morning. I thought you knew. This morning. While I was out in the back pasture training the yearlings, he'd been packing up his life, plotting his grand escape while I was working the land, blissfully unaware that my entire world was being taken apart, one stolen box at a time. "Show me," I said. We walked to the house, my house built with my own 2 hands and my father's legacy. The office door was ajar. His desk drawers hung open and empty, the filing cabinet rifled through. But David was a fool if he thought I kept anything important in such obvious places. Sophia followed me to the kitchen. I reached behind the heavy-duty refrigerator and pulled out the old coffee tin I kept wrapped in plastic. Inside were the real documents, the original deed, in my name and my name alone, the receipts for every fence post, every roof shingle, every single improvement, the breeding records that documented the priceless bloodlines I had cultivated. And there was something else, a receipt from the Grand Oak Inn, dated 3 weeks ago, which I'd found in the pocket of his jacket. Champagne, room service for 2, and a small handwritten note tucked inside. "Can't wait for our new life to begin, C." "You knew," Sophia stated, her eyes on the receipt. "I suspected," I admitted, folding the note carefully and putting it back in the tin. He claimed he was at a cattle auction in Dallas, but there's a world of difference between suspicion and proof. My phone buzzed. It was Helen, David's sister, calling for the 3rd time this week I'd been ignoring her calls. But now I answered. "Ava, thank God you answered." Her voice was tight with stress. "I've been trying to warn you, David has been asking me all sorts of questions about property law, about how to transfer deeds. He seems to think that because you let him handle the tax filings, he has some kind of claim. I told him it doesn't work that way, but..." "He already tried, Helen. He filed something at the courthouse." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. "Ava, you need to get a lawyer. Right now." After we hung up, I sat at my own kitchen table, the very same one where I'd served David breakfast just that morning, completely oblivious to his plans to gut my life by lunchtime. Sophia sat across from me, a silent, solid presence. "Julian Croft," I said finally. "He handled my father's estate, helped me buy this land in the first place. His number was in the coffee tin, too." While Sophia made the call to Julian, I walked through my house, seeing it all as if for the first time. The walls I had painted myself, the floors I had painstakingly refinished, the windows I'd replaced one by one as the ranch began to turn a profit. In the living room, our wedding photo was still hanging on the wall. We were both so young, so full of hope, standing in front of the dilapidated old barn before I'd rebuilt it. Board by board, David's smile looked so genuine back then. I wondered when it had become just a performance. Julian could see me tomorrow afternoon. Until then, there were horses to feed, stalls to clean, and a ranch to run. Whatever David and Chloe thought they had accomplished with their $10 fantasy, the real work didn't stop. It never had. Not through drought or flood or market crashes, and it certainly wasn't going to stop now. That evening, I stood in Midnight Star's stall, checking on the pregnant mare. She'd been agitated for days, and I was worried about a difficult labor. I ran my hands over her sides, feeling the powerful life shifting within her. Life, preparing to enter the world, completely indifferent to the petty dramas of humans. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to her, though I wasn't sure which one of us I was trying to convince. "I built this place from nothing once before. If I have to, I'll fight to keep it." The mare gently nuzzled my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. Outside, the sun was setting over the pastures I had seeded, the fences I had mended, and the dreams some fool thought he could steal for $10. Tuesday morning started with the familiar sounds of home. The coffee maker sputtering its last few drops, the sizzle of bacon in the cast iron skillet my mother had seasoned over 40 years of use. I was slicing fresh tomatoes from my garden when I heard the click of David's dress shoes on the hardwood floor instead of the usual thud of his work boots. He stood in the kitchen doorway, wearing his dark charcoal suit, the one he saved for funerals and meetings with the bank. "We need to talk." He didn't reach for the coffee pot, a ritual he'd followed every single morning for 20 years. No kiss on my cheek, no complaint about the weather, no questions about the day's work. I just kept slicing the tomatoes, the knife moving through the red flesh with practiced, steady precision. "Your breakfast is almost ready. I won't be staying for breakfast." He pulled out his usual chair but stayed standing behind it, his hands gripping the back like it was a podium. "I'm leaving you, Ava. For Chloe Vance." The name was no shock. I'd seen it on that hotel receipt, heard it whispered in his sleep, but his next words were a direct hit. "The ranch has been sold $10. I filed the paperwork at the courthouse yesterday." He slid a set of documents across the table, carefully avoiding the wet ring from my coffee mug. They looked official enough, adorned with a county seal and a notary stamp, all the cheap decorations of legitimacy. But the signature that was supposed to be mine looked like a child's clumsy attempt at cursive. "You can't sell something that doesn't belong to you, David. It's done. Community property. My name is on the tax documents." I turned off the stove and moved the bacon from the skillet to a plate lined with paper towels. Just ordinary movements, while my mind rapidly cataloged 20 years of legal documents he'd clearly never bothered to read. The deed, in my name alone, the inheritance laws that protected the assets I'd acquired with my father's money, the meticulous records of labor I'd kept, documenting every hour I'd poured into this place before he was even in the picture. "When did you plan all this?" My voice was level, almost professional. "Does it really matter? Chloe is coming by later to look at her new property. You should probably start packing." Just then, we heard the purr of a luxury car coming up the gravel drive. Its engine was far too quiet for ranch country, where trucks announced their arrival with an honest, rumbling noise. Through the window, I watched Chloe step out of her Lexus like she was arriving on a red carpet. She wore cream-colored pants that wouldn't last 30 seconds in a real barn, and heels that immediately began sinking into the gravel I had spread myself just last spring. A silk scarf that likely cost more than a mortgage payment was draped around her neck. She walked right through my front door without even knocking. "Oh, good, you're both here." She scanned my kitchen like a home appraiser, her nose wrinkling just slightly at the smell of bacon. "I want to see everything. Let's start with the master bedroom." I remained at the counter, watching this woman navigate my home in shoes designed for marble floors. "The bedroom is upstairs. Watch out for the third step, it creaks." "We'll be fixing that," she declared, already heading for the stairs. "This whole place is so dated, David. Come on, show me our closet." Our closet. He obediently followed her up the stairs while I stood in my kitchen, listening to her heels clicking overhead, marking her territory in rooms where I had nursed him through pneumonia, held him after his father's funeral, and celebrated the good years before they all soured. Sophia appeared at the back door, her sharp eyes taking in the entire scene. In an instant, I saw the Lexus. "Everything all right?" David sold the ranch to his girlfriend for $10. She immediately pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "Julian? No, I'm meeting him tomorrow, but I'm texting him now. This is an emergency." She kept typing as Chloe's voice floated down from upstairs, making plans to tear out the very bathroom I had retiled by hand, wanting to install something more contemporary. They came back down 15 minutes later, Chloe chattering about paint swatches while David carried her purse. "We'll need you out by the end of the week," she told me, as casually as if she were discussing a dinner reservation. "David says you have somewhere else to go." "David says a lot of things." Sophia stepped forward, all 5'4" of her radiating the quiet intimidation of someone who'd faced down a charging bull. "The horses need to be tended to. Are you planning on learning how?" Chloe let out a tinkling laugh that belonged in a cocktail bar, not a working ranch. "Oh, we're selling off those beasts. We're going to convert the stables into an event venue. It's much more profitable. Those beasts. My bloodlines, which I had spent 2 decades painstakingly developing, horses whose genealogies I could recite like they were my own family, because they were. We're heading into town," David announced, his hand possessively on Chloe's back to introduce her to everyone. They left in her Lexus, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on everything I had cleaned just yesterday. Sophia and I stood in the heavy silence they left behind, trying to process the sheer surreality of the morning. "Those papers won't hold up in court," she said. "I know, but the damage he's doing to my reputation, that's going to be his to live with." By 11 o'clock, my phone started ringing off the hook. First, it was Martha Henderson, whose property borders mine to the north. "Honey, is it true?" "Mr. Peterson just called from the supply store, said David's there with some woman claiming she owns your place now. Then Ben Williams from the bank called. 'Ava, we're seeing some confusion here regarding a property transfer. Can you come in and clear this up?' Finally, it was old Doc Hendricks, our vet. I just had the strangest run-in with David and some blonde woman. They're telling everyone you're having some kind of a breakdown. What in the world is really going on?" Each call was a fresh stab of humiliation, my private catastrophe quickly becoming the town's public spectacle. But the worst was still to come. My phone lit up with a picture of Maya, my daughter, away at college, the one pure and good thing David and I had ever created together. Her voice was already thick with tears before I could even say, "Hello, Mom, what are you doing?" No greeting, just an accusation. "Maya," Dad called me. "He said you're trying to ruin his new happiness, that you won't accept the divorce, that you're making up all these lies about the ranch." Every word was a separate, twisting knife. He had gotten to her first, painting his own narrative on a blank canvas. He says you're having some kind of breakdown, that he's worried about you, but you won't get help, Maya, honey. None of that is true. Then why is he saying it? Why would Dad lie? Because that's what he does now, I wanted to scream. But poisoning my daughter against her own father, even a father who was doing this, just wasn't my way. "Come home. Just come home this weekend. I'll show you everything. I have a study group, Mom. Please." The word came out cracked, revealing more vulnerability than I'd intended. "Just come home. Let me explain it all in person." Her sigh echoed across miles of wire and doubt. "Okay, but Mom, if you really are having problems, you need to admit it. You need to get help." After she hung up, I sat at the table where I'd served thousands of family meals, helped with homework, and celebrated birthdays. The bacon had gone cold, the grease congealing into a white film on the plate. Through the window, I could see my horses grazing peacefully in the pasture, completely unaware that their fate was being debated in town by people who considered them nothing more than beasts. Sophia placed a cup of fresh, hot coffee in front of me. "She'll understand once she sees the truth." "Will she?" I murmured. Her father's version of the story is so much simpler. "Mom went crazy" is a lot easier to believe than "Dad committed felony fraud." "Kids figure out their parents eventually," Sophia said, her voice firm. "The truth always has a way of coming to the surface." I hoped to God she was right. But for now, I had a ranch to run, horses to care for, and a life to defend from people who thought they could buy it all for pocket change. The morning had shattered a lot of things, but I was still standing in the middle of the wreckage, already figuring out how to piece it all back together stronger than before. The credit card statement was buried in Thursday's mail, wedged between flyers from the agri-supply and auction notices. I almost tossed it out without a second thought. David had always handled our personal finances, while I managed the ranch accounts. But his name, next to a recurring charge from a storage facility, stopped me cold. Ace Self-Storage. Billed monthly for the last 6 months. Unit 47B. I drove there that afternoon, telling Sophia I needed to pick up some supplies in town. The facility was on the edge of town, a desolate grid of bright orange doors baking under the afternoon sun. The manager, a kid who looked barely out of high school, actually recognized me from the ranch's community riding program, Mrs. Monroe. "You here to check on your husband's unit?" "I lost my key," I lied, the words sliding out with unnerving ease. He cut the lock for me without another question, probably breaking a dozen company policies in the process. The heavy door rolled up to reveal David's secret archive, a stack of banker's boxes, all labeled in his familiar, blocky handwriting. My hands were steady as I pulled out the first one. Inside were our breeding records, but the sales figures were completely wrong. An offspring of Thunder's Pride, which had sold for $50,000, was recorded as selling for $15,000. I found documentation for the priceless bloodlines I had spent decades developing, all of them with altered numbers. A second set of books for the ranch, showing huge losses in years I knew for a fact we had profited. Then I found the letters. Chloe's handwriting was loopy and immature, almost like a teenager's. 2 years' worth of correspondence I had been too busy, or maybe just too trusting, to ever notice. "Can't wait until we can finally stop pretending," one of them read. "That Darby party plan is perfect. Get her drunk, get her signature, and we'll finally be free. The Darby party. 2 years ago." David had been so attentive that night, constantly refilling my wine glass, insisting that I relax for once in my life. I'd woken up the next morning with the worst hangover I'd ever had and no memory of signing a single thing. Now I understood the smug look on his face that morning. I photographed every single document, every letter, every falsified record. The storage on my phone filled up as the evidence mounted. Years of calculated deception documented in David's own handwriting. The last box I opened was filled with receipts for expensive jewelry I had never seen, charges for lavish vacations he had taken without me, and bills from fancy restaurants on nights he was supposedly working late. Back at the ranch, Sophia was waiting for me in the barn office, her expression as hard as stone. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door firmly behind me. "I should have told you this sooner." From a hidden spot in the supply cabinet, she pulled out a folder. 3 months ago, David had a meeting with Jack Morrison about buying Thunder's Pride. He told Jack you'd agreed to the sale, but were too emotional to handle the negotiations yourself. Thunder's Pride. Our foundation stallion, the horse whose bloodline I had spent 15 years perfecting. "I told Morrison you'd never sell him," she continued. He backed off, but then David started approaching private collectors, trying to sell our breeding documentation. He was claiming some of our best horses had been traded. She spread a series of papers across the desk, copies of emails, falsified death certificates for horses that were still very much alive, forged sales agreements. "I've been documenting everything," she said, making copies of originals before he could make them disappear. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I kept hoping I was wrong," she said, her voice cracking just slightly. I thought maybe there was some other explanation. "You two seemed happy. I didn't want to be the one to—" "You protected the ranch," I cut her off. "That's what's important." Together, we started tracing the money trail. Phantom veterinary bills for procedures that were never performed. Invoices for medications never purchased. Doc Hendrick's signature had been forged dozens of times. The total was approaching $500,000, siphoned off over the last 3 years. "There's more," Sophia said quietly. "Last month, while you were away at the breeders' conference, Chloe was here, in your house. I have footage from the barn's security cameras that night. I couldn't sleep. A memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought about in years. The cloud storage account I had set up for ranch documents, back when David pretended he wanted to be more involved in the business. He had long since forgotten that I still had administrator access. At 2 a.m, I opened my laptop and logged into the account with credentials he had never bothered to change. His text messages had been automatically syncing from his phone. 2 full years of their conversations sprawled across my screen. She actually thinks I'm working late. One of David's texts read, "So pathetic." The stupid cow probably doesn't even know what the ranch is really worth. Every lie was celebrated, every plan detailed. They mocked my morning routines, my dedication to the horses, my naive trust in the man I was married to. There were photos of them together at restaurants I thought he'd been visiting with clients, pictures from a vacation in Cabo during what he'd told me was a mandatory business conference. Then I found it, a photo that stole the breath from my lungs, the two of them together in my bed, wrapped in my grandmother's quilt. Taken while I was at the Kentucky Horse Show last spring, Chloe's caption read, "Her bed is way more comfortable than mine." I ran to the bathroom and emptied my stomach until there was nothing left but rage and bile. This wasn't just betrayal. It was the desecration of every sacred space I had ever built. Julian Croft answered his phone at 6 a.m, his voice already sharp and alert. "Ava, I've been going over the documents Sophia sent. There's something you need to know. I was in his office within the hour. He had already pulled all the county records dating back to my initial purchase of the ranch." "The deed is entirely in your name," he said. "Your father's life insurance paid for it before you were ever married to David. His name is only on the tax documents for filing purposes. He has zero legal claim to the property itself." Julian pulled out another folder. "Do you remember the Derby party 2 years ago?" "That party again." "Vaguely. I drank way too much. David had you sign something that night. He probably thought it was a power of attorney or some kind of property transfer." A grim smile touched Julian's lips. "But what you actually signed was a post-nuptial agreement I had prepared for you months earlier and left in your desk. It explicitly states that in the event of a divorce, the ranch and all its assets remain solely yours." "I don't remember any of that. It doesn't matter. It's legal, it's filed, and it's ironclad." David signed it too, probably so drunk he thought it was something else entirely. He slid the document across his desk. Both our signatures were clear, despite being slightly shaky. He'd accidentally protected me from himself. "What about the money he stole? We'll file liens against the property for unpaid labor, 20 years of ranch development, billed at current market rates. Between that and the embezzlement, we're looking at nearly $2 million in claims. Even if his fake $10 sale was somehow legal, which it isn't, the liens would prevent any transfer of title." I sat there in Julian's expensive leather chair, surrounded by stacks of paper that documented a betrayal so complete it should have broken me, but instead I felt something else. A cold, sharp clarity. Every little suspicious moment, every gut feeling I had pushed down, every excuse I had made for David's behavior, they were all warning signs I had chosen to ignore. "File everything," I told Julian. "Every lien, every charge, every single piece of paper that protects what I built. This could get ugly. Ava, there could be criminal charges." "It's already ugly," I said. "Now we make it legal." Sophia was feeding the horses when I got back to the ranch. She looked up as I approached Thunder's Pride's stall, the stallion David had tried to sell behind my back. "How bad is it?" she asked. 2 years of planning, $500,000 stolen, and photos of them in my bed. She absorbed the information without a word, then went back to brushing Thunder's Pride with long, steady strokes. "But the ranch was never his to sell," I added. The stallion nickered softly, and I realized something profound. While David and Chloe were busy scheming and stealing, I had been building something real, every foal born, every acre improved, every young rider we taught. That was my true fortune, and no $10 deed, no matter how many times they filed it, could ever steal what was already fundamentally mine. The next morning, I woke up at 4:30, just like always. I made coffee in the same pot I'd used for 20 years and started my morning rounds as if nothing had changed. The horses needed feeding, whether my world was imploding or not. David found me in the barn, mucking out stalls with the familiar, practiced rhythm of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "You're taking this well," he said, a note of suspicion in his voice. I just kept shoveling. Taking what well? The sale? The divorce? All of it. Life goes on, David. The horses still need to be cared for. He just stood there watching me, probably expecting tears or screaming or begging. Instead, I started whistling softly, the little tune I always used to calm the nervous yearlings. By the third stall, he walked away, clearly unnerved by my complete lack of drama. That afternoon, Julian's investigator, a quiet man named David Park, showed up disguised as a potential student for riding lessons. While I gave him a tour of the arena, he planted recording devices, each one smaller than a button, in the kitchen, the living room, and the office. It was all legal in our state for a property owner protecting against fraud. Just act completely normal, he instructed me. Let them hang themselves with their own words. And so I did. I started packing David his lunch every morning, turkey sandwiches with the crusts cut off, just the way he liked them. I washed his clothes and folded them neatly on the kitchen counter. I even ironed his shirts, the very same shirts I knew he was wearing to go see Chloe. The familiar domestic routines became my stage, and I played the part of the dutiful wife to perfection. On Thursday evening, David brought Chloe to my house for dinner, at my table. "Hope you don't mind," he said, though it was obvious he couldn't care less. Chloe wanted to see the kitchen in the evening light. I served them pot roast using the recipe his own mother had taught me years ago. I set the table with our everyday plates, not the good china. That would have seemed too bitter. I poured water for everyone and kept my movements calm and steady. Chloe talked throughout the entire meal, detailing her renovation plans while sitting in the very chair where my daughter had done her homework for 12 years. "We're thinking marble countertops," she announced, gesturing dismissively at my worn butcher block that had seen 2 decades of family meals. "And we're definitely taking out that wall to create an open concept." "An interesting choice," I replied, passing her the potatoes. David was watching me like a hawk, searching for any cracks in my composure. When he found none, he grew bolder. "You should be grateful Ava didn't fight the sale," he told Chloe, right there in front of me. "She knows she never could have managed this place on her own anyway." Every single word was recorded by the investigators' tiny devices. Every admission of their scheme was being preserved digitally. Friday afternoon, Maya's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she sat in her car for a full minute, clearly steeling herself to face her unstable mother. When she finally got out, her face was etched with the exhaustion of someone who'd been forced to choose a side mom. Just one word, but it was loaded with doubt. "Your room's ready." I put fresh sheets on the bed. She followed me inside, her posture stiff and formal like a stranger in her own home. In the kitchen, she set down her bag and studied me, searching for any sign of the breakdown her father had so vividly described. "Dad says you're not accepting reality." "Sit down, Maya." I laid the evidence out across the kitchen table, piece by methodical piece, the forged signatures, the bank statements showing the theft, the photos from the storage unit, her father's own text messages, mocking my stupidity. Chloe's cruel comments about my work with the horses. Maya's hands started to shake as she read through it all. When she got to the photo of them in my bed, she shoved the papers away and ran to the bathroom. I heard her getting sick. The exact same visceral reaction I'd had. Later, we sat on the porch swing, the one I had hung up when she was just 3 years old. The chains creaked with a familiar rhythm as she leaned her head against my shoulder. "How are you so calm?" she whispered. "Do you remember when you were 8 and that mare kicked you?" She nodded. "You got right back up, walked back to the barn, and got on another horse. No tears, no drama. You told me that showing fear would just make the other horses nervous." "This is different." "No, sweetheart, it's not," I said. "Patience is what separates a trained horse from a wild one. Right now, your father is acting wild. I'm just staying trained." She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry I doubted you." "He's your father. You wanted to believe the best in him." By Saturday, the town had clearly chosen sides. At the agri-supply, Half the customers offered me quiet words of sympathy, while the other half actively avoided my gaze. I overheard Martha Henderson whispering loudly to her sister about how some women just drive their men away with neglect. Chloe had started an Instagram account called Ranch Life Dreams, filled with photos of her posing with my horses, calling them her babies. One caption read, "So blessed to start this new chapter. Country life just suits me." The comments section was flooded with congratulations from people who had no idea she'd stolen my life for $10. The Wilkins family, who had been buying horses from me for 15 years, called to cancel their monthly training session. Just until things settled down, they said, but I knew what they really meant. Drama was bad for business. Only Sophia, Doc Hendricks, and, surprisingly, Old Man Peterson from the supply store remained firmly in my corner. "I've known you since you were 12, Ava," Peterson said when I tried to thank him. "I know what you built, and I know who built it." Sunday morning brought David's worst escalation yet. I returned from a morning horse auction to find new locks on the doors of my own house. My key wouldn't turn. "David," I called through the door. "My medication is in there, my clothes. Should have thought about that before you decided to be difficult," he yelled back. "There's a motel in town." The barn's tack room had an old army cot from a time we'd had a sick horse that needed round-the-clock monitoring. I set it up next to the saddle racks, using horse blankets for bedding. That night, I lay there, listening to the comforting sounds of the horses breathing, their occasional snorts and shifts, a more welcome conversation than any human one. Sophia found me there on Monday morning, bringing me coffee and a bag of fresh clothes from her truck. "This is insane. You need to call the police, no." Julian says to let them think they're winning. The recorder in the kitchen just caught him admitting he changed the locks to force me out of my legal residence. It's just more evidence. She studied my face. "You're playing a much longer game, aren't you?" "David taught me how to play chess years ago," I said. "He always forgot one thing. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board, but she knows when to wait." Chloe arrived that afternoon with a measuring tape and a binder full of fabric samples, parading through my house like she owned it, while I watched from the barn door. She held curtain swatches up to my windows and made plans for where to put her yoga studio. David stood behind her, his hands on her waist, performing happiness for my benefit. They really thought they had won. They thought my silence was surrender. They couldn't see the trap slowly closing around them, couldn't hear the recordings piling up, couldn't possibly imagine that a woman who had built an entire ranch from nothing might just know how to protect it. That night, in the tack room, surrounded by the familiar smells of leather and hay, I smiled in the darkness. The storm was coming, but I was already in the shelter. They were the ones standing out in the open, far too arrogant to even notice the clouds gathering on the horizon. The scream that tore through the barn at 2 a.m. wasn't human. It was Midnight Star, and I knew that sound. It was the sound of a mare in serious trouble. I scrambled off the cot in the tack room, my back screaming from a night on canvas stretched over metal, and found her down in her stall, her sides heaving with contractions that were going nowhere. "Easy, girl, easy." I ran my hands over her swollen belly, feeling for the foal's position. It was all wrong. The baby was turned, maybe tangled. I grabbed for my phone to call Doc Hendricks, and then I remembered, no service. David had suspended my line yesterday. Sophia's number was programmed into the barn's old landline. She answered on the second ring, wide awake and alert. "Midnight's in trouble. It's a bad presentation." "Calling Doc now," she said, and the line went dead. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Midnight Star's eyes rolled white with pain, her legs thrashing against the wooden stall walls. I held her head, singing the same lullaby I used to sing to Maya as a baby, trying to keep both of us from panicking. Doc Hendricks arrived with Sophia right behind him. He took one look at the situation and started pulling equipment from his truck. "Foal's got a leg back. We have to move fast. "I'll cover the bill," Sophia said quietly, pulling out her own credit card before Doc could even ask about payment. We both knew what David had done to my accounts. For the next 2 hours, we were caught in that ancient dance of birth and possible death. Doc's arms disappeared inside the laboring mare as he tried to manipulate the foal, while I held Midnight steady, and Sophia managed the equipment. The barn was filled with the raw sounds of labor, heavy breathing, pained groans, the constant rustle of straw. "Got it." Doc finally grunted. "Legs are forward. Here we go." The foal emerged in a sudden rush of fluid and motion, a perfect black colt except for a single white sock on his left rear leg. He lay still for a terrifying moment, then gave a great shudder and came to life, lifting his impossible head on an impossibly thin neck. "There you go," I whispered, clearing the mucus from his nostrils. "Welcome to the world, little one." Midnight Star turned to inspect her new baby, nickering softly. Within an hour, the colt was standing on legs like stilts, already searching for milk. As I watched him take his first wobbly steps, the thought hit me like a physical blow. This might be the last foal born here under my care. "Don't you dare think like that," Sophia said, reading my expression perfectly. "This place is yours, for now." Tuesday brought an unexpected visitor. James Whitman from First National Bank was standing at the barn entrance looking deeply uncomfortable in his suit and shiny city shoes. "Mrs. Monroe, could we speak privately for a moment?" David appeared out of nowhere, inserting himself between us. "James, I told you on the phone Ava's not well. She's been making all sorts of wild accusations. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Monroe directly," James said firmly. "She's delusional. Ask anyone in town." "I've known Ava since she was a teenager," James countered. "I knew her father. I'll judge her mental state for myself." David's jaw clenched, but he couldn't very well physically stop a bank officer from speaking to me. James walked with me to the far paddock, well out of David's earshot. "The paperwork for this supposed sale," he said quietly, "it just doesn't look right. The signature, the price. None of it makes any sense. Your father would roll over in his grave if I let someone steal what he provided for you." He handed me a business card with his private cell number on it. "Call me. Not the bank's main line. Me directly. Something is very, very wrong here Wednesday afternoon. I had to go into town for supplies. I was at Thompson's Western Wear comparing prices on hay nets when Chloe's voice boomed across the store. "I need the finest equipment you have. Cost is no object. The ranch is generating plenty of income." She was standing at the main counter, her arms piled high with premium leather goods, a $3,000 saddle, crystal-studded bridles, designer riding boots that would be destroyed after one real day of ranch work. "I'm converting the whole operation," she announced to the clerk, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. "Those smelly quarter horses are on their way out. I'm bringing in Arabians. They're so much more elegant for the luxury retreat I'm planning, those quarter horses. The bloodlines I'd spent 20 years perfecting, horses that had won championships, produced champions, and saved troubled kids in our therapy program." She finally spotted me standing by the hay nets, and her smile spread like spilled oil. "Ava, still shopping here, I see." She held up the expensive saddle David says you never could appreciate the finer things. Always so practical, so basic. I didn't say a word. Gary Thompson, the owner, walked over to ring up her mountain of purchases. He ran her credit card once, then twice, then handed it back to her. "Declined," he said flatly. "That's impossible." "Try it again, ma'am. It's declined." "Do you have another form of payment?" Chloe's face flushed a deep, ugly crimson. "This is ridiculous. I own the Monroe Ranch." "The Monroe Ranch account is in Ava's name," Gary said, looking directly at me. "Has been for 20 years. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, lady, but it's not going to work in here." She stormed out of the store, leaving the pile of expensive items on the counter. Gary just winked at me and went back to his office. Thursday started with a crushing pressure in my chest, like someone was sitting on my ribs. By noon, the pain had spread down my left arm. Sophia found me gripping the stall door, trying to breathe through it. Hospital. Now. It's just stress. It's a heart attack waiting to happen. Get in the truck. The emergency room was a sensory assault of bright lights and loud noises. They hooked me up to machines that beeped and whirred, shouting accusations about my blood pressure, my heart rate, my stress levels. The doctor, a young woman who looked disturbingly like Maya, frowned at the readings. You need to rest. Whatever is happening in your life needs to take a back seat to your health right now. Horses don't feed themselves. They also can't feed themselves if you're dead. David never showed up. But somehow, within hours, half the town knew I'd been hospitalized. His version of the story spread faster than a brush fire. Poor Ava's having a complete breakdown, had to be sedated. Maya arrived just as they were preparing my discharge papers, her face a tight mask of fury. Dad's telling everyone, "You're psychotic. Let him talk." My phone buzzed. It was Julian. Ava. The judge reviewed everything. "We have an emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. Can you make it?" I looked at the IV in my arm, at the monitors that were still tracking my every heartbeat, at my daughter's worried face. "I'll be there." "Good," he said, "because this all ends on Monday, one way or another." The nurse protested when I insisted on leaving. "You really need observation. I need to go home. You don't understand the risk." "I understand it perfectly," I said, "but that ranch has been my entire life, for 20 years. If I'm going to have a heart attack, I'd rather have it there than in here." Maya drove me back in silence. As we pulled up to the barn, the new colt was playing in the paddock, testing out his legs with pure, unadulterated joy. Midnight Star watched over him protectively, occasionally calling him back when he strayed too far. "Mom," Maya said softly, "whatever happens on Monday, I'm with you." I squeezed her hand, my eyes fixed on that little colt, dancing on legs that were still learning their purpose. 5 more days of waiting. 5 more days of letting David and Chloe think they had won. The weight of it all sat on my chest, heavier than any heart condition. But that colt, he gave me hope. New life always does. Monday arrived wrapped in low-hanging clouds that promised rain. I called David that morning, my voice carefully controlled and neutral. "I'm ready to discuss the terms. Peacefully. Tonight, 7 o'clock, the Cypress Grill." There was a pause. I could hear Chloe whispering excitedly in the background. "Terms?" His voice was laced with suspicion. "There's nothing to discuss. The sale is final. Then consider it a farewell dinner. For closure, bring Chloe. She should be there." Another pause. More whispering. "Fine. But no drama, Ava." "No drama," I agreed. I arrived at the Cypress Grill at 6:30 and chose a table near the window, a spot where the entire dining room would have a clear line of sight. The maitre d', Robert, who had served us anniversary dinners for 15 years, raised an eyebrow when I ordered water instead of wine. "Celebrating tonight, Mrs. Monroe?" "In a way, Robert, in a way." Julian had arrived even earlier, setting himself up at the bar with his briefcase, nursing a club soda while pretending to read the financial pages. Detective Rachel Morrison was sitting in a corner booth, just another diner enjoying a quiet meal. David Park, the investigator, had a table near the kitchen entrance, strategic positioning, he'd called it. At exactly 7, they walked in. Chloe was wearing a little black dress that was trying way too hard, and around her neck were my grandmother's pearls, the very ones David had claimed were stolen during a move years ago. Seeing them on her throat made my hands tighten around my water glass, but my expression remained pleasant. "Ava." David pulled out Chloe's chair with an exaggerated, theatrical courtesy. "You look tired." "Hospital stays will do that," I replied evenly. They ordered a bottle of Veuve Clicquot, charging it to what they believed was their new ranch account. Robert's eyes flickered toward me, and I gave him the slightest nod. Let them order whatever they wanted. "To new beginnings," David said, raising his glass with that smug smirk I had once found charming, but now recognized as pure cruelty. To endings, I countered, lifting my water glass, and to the truth. Chloe giggled, the sound as sharp as breaking glass. The truth? That's rich, considering you've been living in a fantasy world for weeks. Have I? Well then, let's discuss the truth, like the truth about the Derby party 2 years ago. David's champagne flute stopped halfway to his lips. You kept refilling my wine all night, I continued conversationally. I thought you were just being attentive. But you needed me drunk, didn't you, David? For the papers, I don't know what you're talking about. The papers you thought were property transfer documents. But you were drunk too, weren't you? You signed a post-nuptial agreement instead, the one that guarantees the ranch stays with me in case of a divorce. Chloe's giggle died in her throat. That's not possible. Then there's the storage unit. I went on 6 months of rent. All those falsified breeding records, and the love letters going back 2 whole years. I pulled out my phone and swiped to the cloud account. Your texts are particularly interesting, Chloe. I hit play on a voice message she had sent to David 3 weeks ago. Her recorded voice filled the space between us. Just forge her signature already. She's too stupid to fight back. Once we file it, she'll just roll over like she always does. Diners at the surrounding tables turned to stare. Chloe lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back. Delete that. Why? It's my phone, my cloud account, my evidence. David stood up abruptly. We're leaving. I don't think so. Julian approached our table with 3 folders, moving with the practiced stride of a man who is about to legally dismantle someone's life. Mr. Monroe, Miss Vance. I'm Julian Croft, Mrs. Monroe's attorney. We know who you are, David spat. Then you'll want to see these. Julian placed the first folder on the table. The irrevocable trust that has protected the ranch for the past 6 weeks. Any sale without Mrs. Monroe's explicit, notarized consent is legally void, but I filed a fraudulent document. Which brings us to folder number 2. He opened it, revealing bank statements, falsified veterinary bills, and altered breeding records, $500,000 in embezzlement over 3 years. That's a federal crime, Mr. Monroe. Chloe shrank back in her chair. I didn't know about... Your signature is on several of these deposit slips, Julian noted calmly. And then there's folder number 3, the IRS issue. What IRS issue? Chloe's voice climbed an octave. Your $10 purchase price. The IRS considers that a gift, not a sale, which means you owe gift tax on the full market value of the property that comes to approximately $600,000, due immediately. That's insane, David stammered. Detective Morrison had left her booth and was now approaching our table with the measured pace of law enforcement. Mr. Monroe, Ms. Vance. I'm Detective Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. The entire restaurant was watching now. Forks were suspended midway to open mouths. All conversation had ceased. Even the kitchen staff were peering out through the service window. This is entrapment. David's voice cracked. No, sir. Entrapment is when we convince you to commit crimes you wouldn't have otherwise committed. You did all of this on your own. Chloe's carefully applied makeup began to run in black streaks down her face. You said it was all legal. You said she was pathetic, that she'd never fight back. Shut up, Chloe. Don't you tell me to shut up. This is all your fault. Your plan. Your lies. She stood up, grabbing her purse. I'm calling my lawyer. Ma'am, please remain seated, Detective Morrison said firmly. You can't make me? Actually, I can. You're both being detained pending an investigation into fraud, conspiracy, and the filing of false documents. The maitre d' approached our table apologetically. Perhaps we should move this to a more private space. No need, Robert, I said quietly. They're just leaving. Detective Morrison nodded to 2 uniformed officers who had been waiting outside. They entered the restaurant with the quiet efficiency of professionals, taking up positions behind David and Chloe's chairs. David Monroe, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Ava, please. David turned to me, his bravado finally shattering. We were married for 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything, I replied. until you decided it meant nothing. As they were being led out, Chloe's shriek pierced the hushed restaurant. "This is all your fault, David. You said she was too stupid to protect herself." The dining room remained frozen for a few seconds after they were gone. Then slowly, the normal sounds of dinner began to resume, quieter now, charged with the electric energy of having witnessed a spectacle. Robert approached with a slice of chocolate cake I hadn't ordered. On the house, Mrs. Monroe, that was quite a show. Julian sat down across from me, allowing himself a small, satisfied smile. "The ranch is safe, the criminal charges will stick, and the IRS will most definitely be wanting their money from Ms. Vance. What about the $10? Evidence, though I doubt she'll want it back." I took a bite of the cake, dark chocolate with a raspberry filling. It was the first thing I had truly tasted in weeks. Around me, other diners tried not to stare, but I caught several sympathetic nods. A few even raised their glasses in a quiet salute. Detective Morrison returned briefly. "We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement." "Of course." After she left, I sat alone at the same table where David had proposed to me 20 years ago. The same table where we'd celebrated Maya's acceptance into college. Now it would be remembered as the place where his entire house of lies had finally come crashing down. The expensive champagne they'd ordered still sat in its bucket, barely touched. Robert cleared it away without a word, along with any other trace that they had ever been there at all. I left the restaurant through the kitchen exit, avoiding the small clusters of diners who were still buzzing about what they'd just seen. The drive home felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but shifted, like that moment of charged silence between a clap of thunder and the breaking of a storm when the pressure finally gives way. Tuesday morning arrived with an official summons. Courthouse, 9 a.m. I dressed carefully. Not in anything fancy, but in something respectable. The same navy suit I had worn to my father's funeral, pressed but not new. Maya met me on the courthouse steps, her face drawn but determined. "You don't have to come in," I told her. "Yes, I do. I need to see this through." The courtroom had that familiar smell of old wood and floor polish. David sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller and older in a bright orange jumpsuit. Chloe was beside him in street clothes, her new attorney whispering urgently in her ear. The assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Sophia Klein, stood with the unshakable confidence of someone holding a royal flush. She began methodically, laying out the evidence like dealing cards face up on a table. "Your Honor, we have documented proof of systematic embezzlement spanning 3 years' bank statements flashed on a large screen. $500,000 diverted through fraudulent veterinary bills. David's attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Peterson, objected. This alleged evidence was obtained through entrapment. Mrs. Monroe deliberately..." Objection overruled, the judge cut him off. The defendant's crimes began long before Mrs. Monroe took any protective measures. Continue, Ms. Klein. The forged signatures came next, displayed in a side-by-side comparison that was almost comical in its ineptitude. Then came the messages from the cloud account, each one more damning than the last. The defendants discussed their plan in explicit detail, Ms. Klein explained, highlighting specific texts. Quote, "Get her drunk enough to sign anything." Quote, "She's too trusting to even check the paperwork." Quote, "Once it's filed, she can't fight it." Chloe's new attorney, Mr. Garrett, stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, may I have a moment with my client?" They huddled together briefly. When Garrett returned to the table, his shoulders were slumped in defeat. "Your Honor, Ms. Vance would like to discuss a plea arrangement. Abandoning ship already?" the judge asked dryly. "The evidence is overwhelming." David twisted in his chair to glare at Chloe, but she refused to meet his gaze. "Maya Monroe," Ms. Klein called. My daughter walked to the stand, her chin held high, though I saw her hands tremble as she took the oath. She looked directly at me, not at her father, as she began to speak. He called me at school constantly. He said Mom was having a breakdown and that I needed to come home and convince her to sign some papers. He promised to pay my tuition if I helped him. "And did you believe him?" Ms. Klein asked gently. At first, Maya's voice cracked. "He's my father. Why would he lie to me?" But then I came home and I saw the evidence. The forged signatures, the stolen money, the texts calling my mother stupid. "What else did you discover?" Maya's jaw tightened. "I went to his new apartment last week to get some of my childhood things. Chloe was there. She was wearing my great-grandmother's jewelry, pieces my dad had told me were stolen years ago, and I saw photos from their trips together. From times he was supposedly away at business conferences, David's attorney tried a weak cross-examination. Isn't it true that you're just angry at your father for the divorce?" "I'm angry he tried to steal from the woman who actually raised me while he was off running around with his girlfriend," she shot back. "Objection!" "It's not an objection if it's true," Maya retorted. The judge allowed himself a small, weary smile. When Maya stepped down, she walked right past David's table without a single glance in his direction. She came and sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. More witnesses followed. James Whitman from the bank explained the suspicious paperwork. David Park, the investigator, presented the recordings from the house. Doc Hendricks testified about the forged veterinary bills. Chloe's new attorney, she'd fired Garrett during the lunch break, tried to do damage control Ms. Vance was manipulated by Mr. Monroe. She believed the sale was legitimate. Ms. Klein simply produced Chloe's handwritten letters. Quote, "Once you get her signature, we're set." This was written 2 years ago, Your Honor. Ms. Vance was an active participant in this plan long before she claims Mr. Monroe manipulated her. By the afternoon, both defense attorneys looked utterly defeated. David's last-ditch effort was to take the stand himself. "Ava and I built that ranch together. He claimed I have a right to—" "Mr. Monroe," the judge interrupted, his voice like ice. "Did you or did you not forge your wife's signature on a deed transfer? She would have signed if, yes or no?" David's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Yes. And did you steal $500,000 through fraudulent billing?" A long pause. "Yes." The judge turned his attention to Chloe. "Ms. Vance, you are facing charges of conspiracy, fraud, and filing false documents. How do you plead?" Chloe stood up slowly, her mascara already running. "Guilty, Your Honor. But David said—" "What Mr. Monroe said is irrelevant. You knowingly participated in fraud." The sentencing was swift. David received 18 months in a minimum security prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Chloe got 2 years of probation and restitution requirements that would bleed her dry for years to come. The IRS penalties alone would force her into bankruptcy. "The property known as the Monroe Ranch," the judge declared, "is hereby confirmed as the sole and exclusive property of Ava Monroe. All liens are cleared. Any and all claims by the defendants are permanently void." The gavel fell with a sound of absolute finality. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded. Sophia was waiting by her truck with a surprise. Midnight Star's black colt on a lead rope. "Thought he should see that his home is really safe," she said with a grin. The colt nuzzled my hand, searching for a treat. It was such a simple, innocent gesture, but it broke something loose inside my chest. Not tears, those would come later. Just a wave of relief so profound my knees nearly buckled. Word traveled through town faster than a prairie fire. Within hours, Old Man Peterson had a handwritten sign in his store window. "We stand with Ava Monroe. Real ranch, real woman." My phone buzzed with a flood of messages. "The Hendersons. Never doubted you for a second, Ava. The Wilkins family. Can we resume training next week?" Even Martha Henderson, who'd been whispering about me in the supply store, sent a text. "I'm so sorry. I should have known better." A photographer from the local paper showed up. Wanting a picture for their story, I stood with the colt while Maya held his lead rope. The headline the next day would read, "Local rancher defeats fraud scheme with grace." But grace had nothing to do with it. This was about preparation, patience, and protecting what was mine. That evening, the casseroles started arriving. Tuna noodle from the Pattersons' lasagna from the church ladies. More food than Maya and I could possibly eat in a month. Each dish was a silent apology from people who had chosen the wrong side. "You don't need their approval," Sophia said, helping me unload the fourth casserole from her truck. "I know," I said, "but it's nice to have it back." David would serve his 18 months. I heard Chloe was already packing to leave town. Her social media accounts deleted, her dreams of being a ranch owner dissolved into a nightmare of legal fees and tax penalties. And me? I stood in my kitchen, looking out at my land, my horses, my life restored. The black colt played in the pasture, his legs still a bit unsteady, but growing stronger every day. Tomorrow, I'd go back to my normal routine. The 4:30 wake up, the coffee, the barn chores. But tonight, I would allow myself this moment, this victory. Justice had been served, and it was at exactly the right temperature. The morning after the trial, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in 20 years. Not because I'd overslept. My internal clock still jolted me from bed at 4:30 sharp, but because the crushing urgency was finally gone. The desperate, constant need to protect, to defend, to simply survive had lifted, leaving behind something I barely recognized: peace. 6 months can change everything, or maybe it just reveals what was always there, hiding beneath the surface of a crisis. This morning, I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee that tasted like freedom, watching the sun paint the familiar pastures in a new light. The horses grazed in patterns I knew by heart, but even they seemed different. They moved with an ease they hadn't possessed before. Less skittish animals sense tension in ways humans often choose to ignore. They knew, long before I did, that the danger had truly passed. Sophia emerged from the barn. She was no longer my employee, but my partner. We'd made it official last month, a 60-40 split with her taking the 40 and an option to buy in further over time. "The therapy kids arrive at 9, she called out. 6 of them today. The therapeutic riding program. It had been my dream for a decade, and David's veto for just as long. A waste of resources, he'd called it. A liability nightmare. Now, twice a week, children with disabilities came to find a new kind of strength on horseback. Their parents paid what they could, insurance covered some, and we absorbed the rest. Some things were simply more important than profit. Maya's truck rumbled up the driveway she'd transferred from her expensive out-of-state college to the state school just an hour away. Closer to home, she'd said. But I knew the real reason she wanted to be near the horses, near the healing. On weekends, she worked alongside us, learning the business from the ground up. "Mail's here," she said, tossing a bundle onto the porch railing, including something from Coleman Correctional. David's careful, neat handwriting on the envelope. I'd received 3 others over the past few months. All of them went into the fire unopened. This one I opened, not out of curiosity, but from a need to confirm what I already knew. "Ava," it began. "I wake up every day in a concrete box and remember the wooden walls you and I built together. I hear metal doors slamming shut and remember the barn door that always used to stick until you fixed it with a little cooking oil and a lot of patience. They serve instant coffee here that tastes like regret." He went on for pages, listing all the things he missed. The morning routines, the smell of hay, the sound of Thunder's Pride whinnying at dawn. He wrote about how he'd destroyed everything real in his life for something that had turned out to be nothing but smoke. "I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't," he wrote. "But I need you to know that I finally understand what I lost, what I threw away, what I tried to steal but never actually owned. I read it through once, then walked over to the burn barrel where we dispose of old medical waste." The paper caught fire quickly, his words turning to ash that lifted and scattered on the morning breeze. Some apologies just come too late to matter, Some bridges, once burned, leave gaps that should never be crossed again. From Dad? Maya asked, watching the last of the ash disappear. From a stranger who used to live here? She nodded, understanding completely. We'd been through months of therapy together, unpacking the manipulation, the divided loyalties, the grief of losing the father she thought she knew. She was learning the same lesson I had. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself for not seeing the truth sooner. Around noon, an unfamiliar car pulled up. It was Helen, David's sister. She was carrying a cardboard box that looked far too heavy for her thin arms. "I should have come sooner," she said. Without any preamble, I was a coward. I took the box from her and gestured toward the kitchen. She followed me inside, taking in all the changes. The new paint on the walls where Chloe had measured for her renovations, the flower boxes under the windows she had planned to replace. "I cleaned out David's storage unit," she explained. "The real one, not the secret one you found." She started pulling things out. Photo albums, childhood pictures of Maya, our old wedding album that I had thought was lost forever. He was just going to throw all of this away. He said it hurt too much to keep. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was my mother's recipe box, filled with index cards in her familiar, careful script. The one David had claimed was destroyed by water damage in a basement flood that had never actually happened. "I knew about Chloe," Helen admitted quietly. "I saw them together last Christmas when he was supposed to be visiting me. I should have told you. Why didn't you?" "Because I'm a coward," she repeated, "and because I hoped maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe—" She trailed off, then started again. "He calls me from prison, crying. He says he destroyed the only real thing he ever had." "Good," I said, and I meant it down to my bones. She studied my face, perhaps expecting to see hardness or bitterness. What she found was something much simpler: acceptance. "You're not going to forgive him, are you?" "Forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing," I said. "I forgive him for my own peace of mind, but he is not welcome in my life again ever." She nodded slowly. "I understand. I thought you should know that he knows what he lost." After she left, I hung the new ranch sign that Sophia and Maya had commissioned as a surprise Second Chances ranch. It read in beautiful wrought iron, with the silhouette of a running horse beneath it. It wasn't for David. He'd had his chances and burned every one of them. This was for the therapy kids who were told they'd never walk, now finding freedom on horseback. It was for the rescued horses, given one more opportunity to matter. And it was for women like me, who learned that starting over at 45 wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. I'd heard through the small-town grapevine that Chloe had moved back east. She was working as a receptionist at a law firm, ironically, still paying off the IRS in installments that would follow her for the next decade. Her Instagram dreams of ranch life were long deleted, replaced by the harsh reality of consequence. As evening approached, I walked out to Midnight Star's pasture. Her colt, 6 months old now and officially named Justice, trotted over on legs that had finally found their strength. He'd never known the fear that had lived here during those awful weeks. To him, this place had always been safe, steady, and sure. "You were born right in the middle of the storm," I told him, rubbing his neck. "But look at you now." He nudged my pocket, searching for carrots with the single-minded determination of youth. Behind him, the sun was setting over a piece of land that had been paid for twice, once with my father's life insurance, and again with my refusal to let it be stolen. Maya found me there, watching the last of the light fade. "You okay?" "More than okay," I said. "It's different now, isn't it?" "The ranch feels lighter." She was right. The same fences, the same buildings, the same horses, but the weight was gone. That constant vigilance, that underlying fear of betrayal, in its place was purpose, partnership, and peace. My phone buzzed with tomorrow's schedule. 8 therapy students, a visit from the vet for vaccinations, Sophia's meeting with a potential sponsor for the therapy program. Life was moving forward, not just defending against an attack. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, mine and mine alone now, with a cup of tea and the comfortable quiet of a house that held no secrets, no lies, no betrayals waiting to surface. Through the window, I could see the barn's security light illuminating the path I would walk tomorrow morning at 4:30. The same as always. Except nothing was the same. Everything was better, cleaner, truer. $10. That's what they thought my life's work was worth. But you can't buy what was never for sale. And you can't steal what someone is willing to fight for. The silence of my evening wasn't lonely, it was earned. It was peaceful, and it was completely, unequivocally mine. If this story of calculated justice gave you chills, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Ava calmly played the voice recording of Chloe saying she was too stupid to fight back right in the middle of the restaurant. What was your favorite moment of righteous revenge? Drop it in the comments below, and don't miss out on more gripping stories just like this one. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. End of story.